My name is Robert Teed, and I'm the CEO and founder of the Integri Group. And we are strategic advisors, consultants, and leadership coaches with a particular focus on organizations and individuals who are looking to transition into our next way of working. And I come to my work at Intergri Group with 3 decades as a corporate real estate and workplace executive, both on the end user and occupier side, as well as on the service provider side. So the events of the past 2 years have, in some ways, fundamentally changed the way we think about workplace strategy. But it's also accelerated a few of the trends that were already in place prior to the pandemic. 2 of those are choice and flexibility amongst employees and where they do their work, and enterprises and corporate real estate executives really looking for more flexibility in their real estate portfolio. So those 2 trends were sort of already in the works prior to the pandemic. They've been accelerated as a result of the pandemic. And then the workplace strategy piece, it's changed, started to change pretty dramatically as we think about employees working in a much more distributed way, and we've got to be thinking about our workplaces quite differently with this massive distribution that we're seeing. So, there's several challenges and opportunities that show up as a result of our changing workplace strategy. The challenges are, we're still sort of missing what the employee behaviors are going to be. We haven't brought knowledge workers back en masse yet into the workplace, and so we're missing the behaviors. So I think that's a challenge that will continue to be present for a bit. The opportunity is the same. It's that we have an opportunity to experiment to make sure that we're creating the right experience for employees as we look at our next way of working. And so it's a challenge and it's an opportunity that we in the workplace business need to be embracing. So the needs of the employees in the enterprise, they've changed in many ways towards caring for the employee and really focusing on the employee being central to everything. And that was a trend that was happening as well before the pandemic, but as we sort of moved into the pandemic environment, it became all about how do we care for the employees, how do we keep them safe, how do we keep them productive and engaged in this work from home environment. And so that, sort of focusing in on the employee in a hyper focused way is relatively new, and I think that's something that will continue as we move into our next way of working as well. So the trends in the market as we think about real estate portfolios, it really is about this idea that employees now own the choice of where they do their knowledge work. And so the real estate trends that are showing up are really how do we get closer to the employee where they live, where they reside, how do we bring work to them? Because many of them aren't going to want to continue to work from home all the time. They may want to work in some sort of an office environment. So how do we continue to make our portfolios more flexible? And certainly as we look at the usage of some of the company offices, the way employees are using them are going to be quite different. There's probably going to be a lot less heads down work happening and a lot less frequency of on-site work happening. So those are all trends that we're having to think about from a workplace strategy and market trend perspective. So the factors that are coming into play are all around how the employee is going to be using the workplace and how those behaviors are going to show up, and whether or not we're going to see employees come back to the workplace to use the company workplace in a more collaborative way, whether or not there is a movement back to the workplace to do heads down work. And so really the factors are looking at how do we sort of measure the employee behaviors and how they're going to use the workplace. And many of those factors haven't shown up yet. So as we're thinking about the workplace, we are missing a key piece, which is what are the employee behaviors going to be. Yeah, so the risk factors, they're similar to what I just mentioned around not having clarity on the employee behaviors yet. So I think, before we rush out and make a lot of concrete decisions on reducing our portfolios or increasing them or highly distributing them, we do have to make sure that we're very clear on how employees are going to work. And much of the survey data that we've gathered over the last 18 months has been in the middle of a pandemic, and it's really powerful data, but until we see how the behaviors show up and how employees really do start to use our workplace or how they do work, I think we have to make sure we're leaving a lot of room for flexibility and experimentation and pivot capabilities as well. So as we think of benefits, I think a key benefit that we should focus on is making sure that employees are able to work from wherever they are, and that's not a benefit in the traditional sense, but it's really that no matter where you're doing your work, that you're equally enabled, and that we're making sure that employees are empowered, enabled in many different modes, and so that's a benefit, if you will. I also think that we've learned an awful lot around mental health in the workplace, and companies and enterprises really focusing on how they can contribute to the positive mental health of employees has become really important. And I certainly don't want to lose sight of diversity, belonging, inclusion. Some of the things that we've really struggled with before the pandemic, we've learned an awful lot about over the last 2 years, and we have to be focusing on as we move into our next way of working. And so that's not a benefit, that's foundational, that's an absolute requirement, but those are things that we don't want to lose sight of as we move into our next way of working. So I think what we're going to see, the usage of workspace by employees post-pandemic is going to be the company office. For those employers that are embracing hybrid, will be collaborative work. It'll be where folks come together and spend time in partnership with others. A lot of the heads down work, the individual work, will happen away from the company office, whether that's at home or whether that's at a co-working site closer to home or at a third place. I think you'll see collaboration happen in the company office. In many of the other types of work, the task-oriented, heads down, even some of the creative work that individuals might do, be done away from the office. So as we think about sort of the evolved workplace and evolved workplace strategy, different thinking that needs to show up, certainly around technology and how we enable employees in this multimodal, distributed way of working, and what are the things that they need to be engaged and productive and effective regardless of where they're working. And technology can play a massive role in that, and not just being effective at the work in the company workplace, but really no matter where you are. So that technology layer becomes really important. And then the thinking just generally that the workforce is now distributed, and how do we keep that workforce engaged, developing, etc., when we're now distributed and we have less of this clustering that's been happening in the past. That's going to require a different way of thinking by enterprises and certainly by leaders and managers on how they keep their teams engaged. So some of the lessons I'd love to share with folks that I've observed or that I've learned myself is really partnering very closely with your HR partners, your IT partners, and really looking holistically at the employee experience. We did that okay prior to the pandemic. We definitely did that fairly well during the pandemic, caring for employees, making sure that they were well cared for, productive, engaged, during the pandemic. And as we exit the pandemic and move into our next way of working, really having those supporting functions focus in on how do we create the best employee experience possible, regardless of where they're working or when they're working. That's going to be really key. And I would love for others that are workplace execs to take those lessons forward. So driving forces of new workplace strategies are simply that employees now own, in many cases, the choice of where they do their work. And so the formulas that we would have used pre-pandemic to sort of design our workplace strategy, our real estate strategy, our portfolio strategy, many of those sort of metrics and formulas and rules of thumb aren't going to apply going forward. And so those key drivers are really that the employee piece has changed, where they work, when they work, how they work, and our portfolios have to be prepared to respond to that. So the strategy around talent is foundational, fundamental, and we have to really focus on attracting new talent, retaining talent, and that's with this understanding that choice and flexibility is now in the hands of the employee. So we have to recognize that. We have to do that in a way where our culture still flows throughout this distributed workforce. And so those things are really important, and those are all about the employee. As we think about cost savings, I would caution anybody that thinks that there's going to be a lot of cost savings associated with our next way of working, in particular around real estate savings. There'll probably be some, and there'll be repositioning of portfolios, but I think a lot of those savings will be reinvested in how we enable our distributed workforce, how we train leaders, how we leverage technology. So while they may move from the real estate line item, they don't necessarily go away, they get redeployed elsewhere. So hybrid meetings, that's $1 million question. I've seen this unfold in a couple different ways. There are some companies that have embraced this idea that all meetings will be virtual, even if folks are in the same room, and that levels the playing field. So everybody in the meeting is on video. I've also seen companies really focus on trying to level the playing field in a hybrid way, some in the room, some outside of the room. I think more important than the technology or the medium are really the folks that are running those meetings, that are leading the meetings, and being well aware and strong facilitators in recognizing that we need to bring voices out of those that are on video and those that are in the room, and not just play to the room. That's not a technology solve. That's really a development opportunity for leaders, team leaders, facilitators, et cetera, to make sure that we're really bringing inclusivity and belonging to the forefront in any of these mixed mode meetings. I would just encourage all that are in this space to really allow for some patience and some experimentation until we know what the employee behaviors are going to be. We're missing those in many cases, and if we rush too quickly to implement concrete solutions, we may not quite get it right. So let's allow ourselves this opportunity to experiment, to be flexible, and to really get our next way of working right.